we all have to deal with each other on a daily basis. It's great to see you all here, happy and everything. Randy's in the house, and the conversation level went up about 12 decibels when she got here, so that's fun. And we're very excited to have a panel now with Matthew Moore. He was here yesterday, so I'm going to fly through this. America's syndicated Bitcoin radio host and Amazon best-selling author. Matthew is a successful business owner. He's as equally successful as he was yesterday. Amazon's best-selling author, Bitcoin consultant, syndicated radio host. He's going to do a great job introducing his panel to you, and please pay attention. And this has already been counting down. Don't count them against my time, so reset that whenever they get up here so I can still be mean to them and be telling the truth about their time. Oklahoma's government, since 2019, Matthew has played a key role in consulting Oklahoma's government about cryptocurrency and getting positive legislation across the finish line. Matthew's an advocate for free markets, sound money principles, and is a regular advisor for the Oklahoma Bitcoin Association. Get on up here, get your microphones out of your seats. Also, if y'all would, hold the microphone very close to your chin, and then we hear you a lot better. It's awesome. And there you go.
All right, well, this is going to be a fun one. I'm from Oklahoma, if you don't know already, and we've got Oklahoma's Deputy Attorney General. In fact, I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves. So before we get started, why don't you tell the lovely audience who you are and what you do?
Start with me, start with you. We'll okay, that's orderly, right? I'm Keith Grossman. I'm the president at MoonPay.
Richard Jackson, Deputy Attorney General for the state of Oklahoma for digital assets.
Perfect. So we got a lot to talk about because I think all of us would agree that when it comes to government and crypto regulation, we are definitely in the dawn of a new era, and there's a lot of implications. So when it comes to crypto regulation in the United States, a lot of us, and you even said this on my show recently, our show I should say, that the dog has finally caught the car, it seems. And so I want to unpack that idea. What does that mean, and do we have anything to fear? Is game theory at play in the sense that they are now joining us, or do we still have some big fights ahead of us when it comes to regulation?
Well, so I think, right, let's set the scene. If we would have this, we did have this conversation about a year ago, and a lot of the push in 2024 was make sure you're being vocal and you're advocating for crypto as an asset, as an industry, as an important policy matter for you, a potentially voting person here in the United States. We are past that phase. The elections came in 2024. Staying with crypto, the industry, the communities involved were very heavily involved, and I think that in 24 there was a referendum on being anti-crypto. Maybe not being pro-crypto, but being anti-crypto didn't get you anywhere anymore. So we have moved past that. To your question about is this game theory playing out? Are we now joining? I think it's probably more appropriate to say that we are in the phase of ensuring that this is now not going to be co-opted, that it is not just a talking point from a potential elected official or a regulator to say, don't worry about me, I'm not anti-crypto, continue to vote, continue to donate. But as I think John mentioned yesterday, is that all of the systems and processes that led to the 2022-2023 debanking and Operation Choke Point 2.0, all of those people, that system still exists kind of writ large. It's just now quiet. So I would say, are we in the they join you phase, or are they still in the fight you phase? I think we're in the let's make sure we're not going to get co-opted phase of the the debate.
Yeah, no, I think that you said it quite eloquently, and sorry, we have to go closer.
Yeah,
you said it quite eloquently, and I agree with you. I do think that if you look at where we are today, right, like pre-election, and this is not a pro-Trump, minus Trump thing, this is just actually like, there was no such thing as an anti-crypto army, okay, but there sure as hell was a crypto army, right, and I think that that's a really important point to point out, because this idea that Elizabeth Warren was creating this anti-crypto army was this fabricated sort of notion that I think went too far, right? Now we're also in a corrective phase, right? And I actually think that what I've found from a lot of my conversations, whether it's with Republicans or Democrats, is a lot of people feel that the sort of like the median had gone too far to an extreme on an anti. And so if you look at where we are today, It's actually, I would argue, one of the greatest moments for the crypto industry as a turning point. But to your point, I agree, like, you can't take your foot off the gas, right? Most industries, if you get the slightest amount of clarity, can all of a sudden accelerate tremendously in terms of growth. If you look at what's happening with crypto, for 15 years, crypto has existed in this gray area and has sort of like evolved where people have said, you know, like, I want to do what's right, I want to move it forward, but I don't know if this is right or wrong based on the rules of the road. Right now, you're seeing not only regulatory clarity, right? The SEC and the CFTC are really coming down, and they're being very clear. This is a security. This is not a security. This falls in our domain. This falls in their domain. You're seeing legislative clarity, right? The U.S. passed its first, you know, law in the crypto space with the broker-dealer rule, with the DeFi broker-dealer rule. We're about to pass stablecoin legislation. We're about to see market structure legislation. By the way, this is not just in the U.S. This is globally. You're seeing regulation in MiCA as well, right? You're seeing regulation in the U.K. You're seeing banking clarity. I can't express how important that is, right? The OCC is clarifying all the things, all of the structures that were in place for Operation Choke Point 2.0. They're literally clarifying out. And you're seeing accounting clarity, right, with the FASB rule changes. So like crypto right now is undergoing 4 moments of extreme clarification. But if we take our foot off the gas, like, we're not going to actually get anywhere. We're going to spin around. Like, we're at the beginning phases of seeing this momentous change.
I love it. Well, and you know, when you're looking at governments, whether it be state or federal, a lot of legislative efforts have been taking place over this last year. And specifically right now, I mean, yes, the federal government seems to be excited about stablecoins. And we've got bills like the Genius Act that's happening. So what's your take on the Genius Act? What are the implications for the industry moving forward in this terms?
So, you know, we've been very public at MoonPay about our belief in the Genius Act. We actually think it's wonderful and pro-competition, right? Like, we should not be legislating based on where the jurisdiction of the founding company is. We should simply say, if you're an innovator wherever you are, we as America want to support innovation, and we want to make sure that you're adhering to the rules of this country. We thought that some of the sort of advocacy that was coming specifically from US-based companies that were trying to create artificial moats was absolutely ludicrous, and we said so. Like, we published an op-ed sort of calling it out. At the end of the day, like, the US is the best country on the planet to innovate in because it has the fairest rules for everyone to be able to compete within. That's the space that we wanted to see, and we're really pleased to see Genius move forward.
And so I will touch on stablecoins as an example and in principle for kind of what we're seeing and what's developing. Let's be frank, the stablecoins that are being discussed at the federal level really are, if you want to take a CBDC, right, central bank digital currency, you could just make that a centralized corporate digital currency. They are just as easily surveyable. They are just as easily controllable. So from the federal government's perspective, right, this is the easiest, softest, baby food version of getting into digital assets that exists. It is taking what is potentially, you know, what FedPay could have been if they were pro-crypto at the federal level, and just saying, we're just going to privatize that and allow it to work. We're going to maintain our ability to surveil. We're going to maintain our ability to take custody, to seize assets, et cetera. That's why you're seeing it being first, right? It's the easiest one for the federal government to absorb and digest. That is a step in principle towards what we're describing as an extent, to the point. Can't take a foot off the gas, continue to advocate for the industry, for pro-crypto policies, because once we get comfortable with the easy ones, then the really hard questions start to be the ones that are left. And so when you talk about stablecoins versus self-custody rules, well, again, we have to make sure that this is not going to be co-opted. You say, yes, it's nice that you're giving us clarity in the regulatory sense to be innovators, but I, the individual, the citizen here, also want to maintain my rights and privileges that I got into crypto for to begin with. So in principle, the government, especially the federal government, is moving in the direction. They're now willing to take votes, which is really the most important thing, but you have to make sure that we continue to move the ball forward in the areas that are maybe less palatable from the government's perspective.
Okay, fair takes, fair takes. So yesterday we had a panel on self-custody, and we were talking about banks getting involved in offering crypto services and products. Obviously, it's a lot easier for grandma to go to Wells Fargo and buy Bitcoin or Litecoin or whatever cryptocurrency. Let's talk OCC, FDIC. This month is May. We got some new guidance in regards to these kinds of institutions moving forward. What are your take on the whole new guidance for banks and this industry and its impact?
Well, I think I'll give the enforcement perspective side is that banks as an industry
Wait,
aren't.
do I have to give the non-enforcement side?
No, you can do whatever you want on
I'm just
that,
making
yeah.
sure. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm just speaking from what I know, is that banks are incredibly risk-averse institutions, and so where they're, for instance, the reason that you didn't see banks getting involved in custody services, and you maybe saw like the Fidelities of the world offer segregated accounts for crypto, was that the pick up the phone soft regulation said, do not touch this. Do not get involved, and banks said, you know what? Why would I move into a potentially $1 trillion asset class when I have hundreds of trillions in asset? The balance of risk doesn't. So I think what you're primarily going to start seeing is, again, just in the same way that federal regulators are going to take the easiest legislation first, banks will take the lowest risk opportunities to, again, make profit that they can, but it is, again, a step in principle towards large monolithic institutions now being able to get involved in the ways that they're most comfortable. And so today we're talking about custodial rules and the impacts on liquidity and your solvencies. And so maybe they just offer a portal on the website to be able to buy, sell, hold through a third party. In 2 or 3 years, that's going to be something different, eventually to the point where, again, right, stable coins maybe come through, maybe you start seeing mobile wallets embedded into technologies, and so again, it's steps in principle that we should reward and support, but knowing that it is, right, just the first step in the next phase.
So I love this. If I may, I'd like to sort of like break this into two parts. One is, like prior to MoonPay, I spent 20 years in media. I ran Time Magazine and Time and Bloomberg and some other properties. And when I was in media, people would talk about the platforms, right? They'd talk about magazines, they'd talk about digital, they'd talk about radio, television. When you talk about print, it's a vertical, right? You're either magazine or you're not. It's binary, right? When you talk about radio, it's a vertical, right? Terrestrial radio, you're either radio or you're not. When you talk about linear television, it's a vertical, right? You're either cable television or you're not. When you talk about digital, it's a horizontal. Anything that can be digitized will be, right? So you could have digital text, you could have digital audio, you could have digital video, you could have digital social, right? Then there's technologies, right, that can be digitized, programmatic and whatnot. The sort of notion that I always went by was, if it could be digitized, it would, right? And ultimately, if it is digitized, it can be tokenized, right? And when you think about that, what you have to start to realize is that crypto in the media is often talked about, and also with a lot of politicians is often talked about as a vertical. And it's very much a horizontal, right? And so there are many verticals within crypto, stable coins being one, meme coins being another, right? Bitcoin being another, the ETFs being another, DeFi protocols being another. So far, so on. And by the way, custody being one, and like some of the other more complicated sort of aspects being others. When you start to think about it like that, it totally makes sense to the mental model that you give, right? Because the area that you want the government or the banks to move into is the lowest hanging fruit, right? Like the easiest ones, because like there's no way if Zuckerberg is standing in front of Congress and they're asking him, how does Facebook make money, that people are going to be able to understand self-custody off the bat. Stable coins are really easy, like when you start to think about it, right? Stable coins are very similar to when voice over IP sort of emerged, right? If you remember like the commercials at AT&T that were like $2.49 to call India, right? They don't exist anymore. Today it's free to call because essentially voice over IP was enveloped, like telephony was enveloped by the internet. So the price went down to zero. Stable coins are essentially the internet's sort of currency. So it's like the internet is absorbing money for the first time ever, which is amazing, but we do want regulation for that, right? And that's where we want them focused first. We don't need them on more complex issues, the second, third, fourth order issues. We need them at the platform level. As it relates to the OCC rules, I actually love your perspective on the space. I'll give you the business perspective, not the unregulated perspective. The business perspective, from my vantage point, is I sat down in the end of November with a major bank, tier 1 player, and they said to me that I was the first crypto company that they met with that they did not have to report to the OCC. This was the first time post-election that they met with a think about that they met with a crypto company that they did not have to report to. We, as MoonPay, are currently engaged with all of the top banks in terms of conversations that 6 months ago we could never have. And by the way, what's ironic is when you look at the MoonPay, PayPal, or Venmo relationship, that's a compliance relationship, right? Over the past few years, we've spent so much money on compliance and fraud and AML and making sure that we were doing everything right, even in this gray area. And that worked with the PayPals and the Venmos of the world, but now all of a sudden the banks appreciate, it's like during the time of gray area, you actually took all of the regulatory stuff that we need seriously, so we will take you seriously. And so I think that the OCC changes have actually enabled real constructive conversations to take place for the first time, at least since I've been in this space full time.
Yeah, and I want to actually kind of expand on the thing where you said there's platforms and there's verticals. I think now the dog chasing the card not being co-opted, to borrow both of those analogies, is that I think now is the time where, as an industry and a community, there needs to be internal conversations about which things are in the properly regulated verticals. So banking, I think we could all agree that I want my bank to be regulated. I don't want my bank regulated in the same way that I want my self-custody regulated. So can we have a thoughtful conversation with regulators and lawmakers to say, in this space, banking, custodial services, etc., you guys, that we want you to be there very strongly. And at the same time, in these areas, we want you to be more hands-off. And to be able to communicate why that is of value to industry, not just the crypto industry, but the banking industry, to the regulators, etc. That if you want to, that allows people who are getting into crypto, my mom, people who are for the first time, that they can play the way that they want, and we don't have an FTX of grandma's retirement funds, because that's the last thing that you want, is that kind of blowback. FTX being an offshore, right, decentralized exchange, people were willing
Centralized.
well, supposedly. People were willing to let that one catch on fire because it's a casino. You do the same thing to the Fidelities, the Bank of Americas. That's right. Talk about the end of crypto. But I just want to make sure we get that out there.
All right. Well, we made our time. So Keith and RJ, thank you for giving your thoughts.
Thank you.
Great job, guys. Great job. Great job.